So with many players like myself reaching max level and diving into the endgame of Dragonflight, this expansion is really starting to feel like a breath of fresh air and even sort of a spiritual successor to the Legion expansion, if you will. Now, while there still is a bit of that new expansion hype and we're still sort of in that honeymoon phase, there's still a lot of new endgame content to go through, as well as refreshing takes on older types of content. And of course, as always, this guide will be with a gold making twist, so let's get into it. So first of all, if you haven't done so already, you do want to reach max level, which is level 70 with one character, as it'll unlock adventure mode as well as world quests for your other characters. But if you can't quite make the cut and your focus is gold making like myself, then you might want to consider leveling one of your professions or both of them to level 50 to be able to unlock some of the profession weekly quests in Valdrakken, the capital city, which I believe can be accessed, and I could be wrong, without hitting max level first. But either way, getting to level 50 can be good for gold making regardless, because that'll give you better skill and more opportunities for, crafting some of these even early game items that are some of which are selling pretty well. And now getting back into the end game, there are a few important weekly quests that you do want to knock out, especially if you want to rank up your renown with the various factions, right? And factions and renown can be very important, not only for getting gear and things like cosmetics, but if you're into gold making, again, like me, you'll be able to unlock various recipes from a lot of these different factions, depending on what your professions actually are, right? So I recommend checking out which factions you want to prioritize based on the professions that you'll be focusing on your main characters. And the first and most important of these quests is probably Aiding the Accord, which will have you collecting 4,000 reputation over the week from any factions of your choosing, which will reward you with tons of reputation and an epic chest filled with likely gear and lots of other things like resources. Next, if you have time, there are other weekly quests like the PvP quest here, which has you collecting honor and will also reward you with quite a bit of reputation and some honor. Next, on the PvE side, we also have these dungeon quests over here, which I believe are weekly, but I can't seem to confirm on any guide out there, so I guess we'll find out. But anyhow, these give a bit of reputation as well, although they're probably not the most efficient way to get reputation, so I wouldn't necessarily prioritize them unless you're going to be running dungeons anyway. And next up, for you gold makers out there, we also have a set of profession related quests. Starting with every single week, you'll be able to talk to Thomas Bright here to collect actually free artisan's metal, which are important components and sort of time gated, right? Which you'll need to use for various higher end crafts. And next, the Artisans Consortium also offers a variety of weekly quests, starting with collection quests for your professions, with some of them being somewhat difficult to complete, like this peacock feather plucking one, where it's really hard to find peacocks around the Dragon Isles. So it actually makes sense that this is a weekly quest, and you sort of have to gradually chip your way through it. But they do reward 3 profession skill points, which, as you'll know, are extremely valuable, especially if you want a sort of head start and gain or maintain a lead or keep up with the other gold makers on your realm or region. And besides these, there are also other profession weekly quests that require you to craft something or bring something to the quest giver. For example, here we have the inscription version, which actually has me crafting 5 of these parchments. I think each one is extremely expensive to craft right now given the materials. I think it's about 2,500 to craft one, but I might actually consider doing it because, again, of how valuable these skill points are early on in this expansion. And here's another example of a blacksmithing weekly quest, which has me crafting 2 of these blue axes, which comparatively is a lot cheaper to do, so I just did so right away to get my 3 weekly skill points. And next, the last set of Artisans Consortium weekly quests have you doing or fulfilling several work orders. Now, there might be a gathering version of these quests as well, but I'm not really sure what they are. Anyhow, with the crafting professions, you'll be fulfilling 5 work orders. However, currently, at least from what I've seen on my server, probably with players sort of just entering the endgame, there haven't been that many work orders at all that are available via the crafting tables. However, I was able to get somewhat lucky and get like a 15,000, nearly 15,000 gold commission off of a fairly simple craft. I just had to spec a little bit more deeply into one of the axe crafting specialization, and I was able to, or mace crafting rather, as you can see here, and I was able to craft this for 14,000 gold. And that was pretty lucky because I couldn't really find anything else to do, as well as on my scribe. And by the way, one way that you can complete this quest is, even though there aren't as many public orders available right now, you should be able to request a personal order from an alt, right? So you can just request some like very simple personal crafting order from any of your alts that are, have access to this system, and you'll be able to complete the weekly quest that way. And by the way, one sort of underrated tip in my opinion is to also check out the unlearned recipes if you're a crafter, and actually look at the sources of any of these recipes, right? Especially the ones that you might want to focus on. Some of them can actually drop from PvP, some from specific bosses, and so on and so forth. Some come from your talent tree. So it might be good to try to unlock as many as you can if you're going to be doing, say, PvP or PvE anyway, depending on your preference, to be able to unlock more options for you to be able to fulfill these crafting orders for other players. Now, before we move on to the next set of routines, another very important tip if you want to focus on gold making is to definitely try to keep up as best you can with Artisans Consortium quests, right? So you want to do all these aforementioned weekly quests and try not to skip them, because once you get standing with them by increasing reputation, you'll also be able to buy, in addition to the profession knowledge that you gain from the quests themselves, with reputation you also be able to buy these tomes from the reputation vendor that'll give you a large profession knowledge boost as well. And moving on to our next set of activities, we have weekly events, which, depending on which professions you have and which factions you want to prioritize, you might want to focus on doing some of these first, as there are a couple that actually reward you multiple times per week, although the rewards do get progressively worse, namely the hunts with a centaur, as well as the siege on Dragonbane Keep for the Valdraken Accord. And by the way, to unlock each of these events, you do have to reach a certain renown level, although the renown requirement is pretty low, so I think it's either 3 or 5 for most of these. But anyhow, the first completion of each of these weekly events will give you a epic cache, followed by a blue cache if you do it a second time, and so on and so forth. And these can contain things like reputation, turn-in tokens that'll give you even more reputation, and things like gear and other useful resources. And now the way to locate and do these events is actually pretty straightforward. First of all, you can check out your world map to see which one is currently spawning. For example, the siege actually doesn't begin until the timer actually says there's no time left, whereas with the centaur hunts, they actually last for 2 hours at a time. And with any of these events, it's highly recommended that you go to the group finder to find a group, because they're pretty much not soloable to my knowledge, as you'll be fighting not only lots of mobs but also tough elite mobs, but again are very easy to do if you have a group, and there are tons of groups that you'll be able to find anyway. And the ones that mainly do require killing stuff and a group are the, again, Dragonbane Keep sieging, as well as the centaur hunts, whereas the Iskara Tuskar feast can be pretty much done without a group, but you do have to be there on the map, or check your map to be there on time for when the feast starts, and then you'll be able to do it pretty easily. And speaking of which, I do want to quickly highlight the Iskaran Tuskar faction really quick, regardless of whether you need recipes from them, because of the fishing perks that it unlocks, which includes being able to set up fishing nets around the Dragon Isles, which basically catches you fish passively. I haven't tried this myself, but it seems like a pretty cool way to make some relatively passive gold, while fish are still valuable anyway, or depending on how many fish you can actually catch with the method. But I'm definitely looking to try it out, and if it's viable, I'll make another video on it. And lastly, for another weekly event that I want to quickly highlight, it is to either pledge to Rathian or Sibelian and unlock their not only daily quest but also a weekly quest for another cache that you can get. For this, I believe it's not as good for gold making because a lot of the rewards are more cosmetic, but some of the rewards or the quests do reward you with like gold and stuff, so that can be a bit of help, and you can get small bits of reputation and things like, you know, Dragon Isle resources and things like that if you have extra time to spare. And now before we transition into daily routines, there's one last weekly activity that I want to cover for profession specifically, and this is to try to learn your weekly inscription treatise for an extra skill point per week. So these are solely crafted and provided by scribes, and you have to place in work order for it if you're not a scribe yourself, because these are bind on pickup. For example, here I can craft the inscription version of it. However, these are pretty rare right now if you're not looking for one from Inscription, because scribes actually have to learn the other profession versions of it by crafting the Inscription version, right? And I've crafted a few and I haven't learned any of the other ones yet. So when I checked crafting orders, nobody was offering it on my server, but they should be popping up relatively soon. So keep your eyes peeled for those. Transitioning over to the next part, I also want to cover some daily routines that you can do, especially for goal making, and in this case, a lot of reputation gains. So first up, you can do some of the daily quests from pledging to Rathian or Sibelian, and I do recommend doing this in a group as well, as it'll greatly speed up your efficiency. And next, if you need Maruk Centaur rep, there's also a set of seemingly bi-weekly quests, and these are clearly indicated on your world map as well. You can see sort of a icon where these the quest hubs are located, and you can knock these out for some quick reputation as well. And also, world quests are indeed making a return, with one change seemingly being that most of them actually span for a few days now, or at least a couple of days before they expire, giving players a bit less pressure when it comes to having to, or feeling FOMO, right? When it comes to having to complete a lot of these world quests. And there's no like meta world quests or like calling, so to speak, right, where you have to complete like 4 world quests with a faction. Instead of that, we have the Aiding the Accord meta quest, which again has you collecting 4,000 reputation throughout the week. So it's also no longer that 3-day expiry calling quests from before, and actually, in my opinion, takes a lot of that pressure away from players having to just log in every day, right? Now, as for daily gold making activities, it's pretty standard stuff. For example, if you're a gatherer, you would just do some of your gathering routines that you're familiar with. And also, notably in Dragonflight, you can actually pick up some profession knowledge items that when you learn them, you'll get profession knowledge. And I believe it's sort of time gated as well. You'll get a limited quantity per week. So be sure to get at least some gathering done every week in order to get that. I think it's sort of to match crafting, which has crafting orders or other sources to get these profession knowledge, right? And speaking of which, you also want to do your, whatever you do for gold making. In my case, I do a lot of crafting, sniping stuff out for relatively cheap if I can from the auction house, reposting, and honing in on the things that are selling pretty well. Speaking of which, as a quick tip right now, some of my lower tier like green blacksmithing items are even selling, like the pickaxes for miners, as well as a sickle for herbalists, and some other various weapons. Even for my scribe, I'm selling like the offhand for spellcasters and staffs and stuff. So sort of keep an eye on what's selling well and for higher prices on your server. Although things can change really quickly, especially with people starting to gear up when like mythic dungeons, they start gearing from them and things like that. And of course, if you're a crafter, a new significant addition with Dragonflight is the crafting orders, which will have a limited number that you can fulfill daily. However, with how things are right now, there just aren't that many crafting orders that you can do that are available for the public. So definitely keep your eyes peeled for once people unlock more materials to be able to request for these crafting orders, right? And also look to unlock more recipes through your looking at which unlearned recipes you still have and doing your required PvP or PvE activities, or even just buying these recipes out from the auction house, right? That's sort of another beautiful thing, I guess, with Dragonflight, where you don't have to necessarily participate in these activities to get the recipes. You can also buy what people have found. If they do the activity and find the recipe, they can actually list it on the auction house, which you can then buy from them, right? If gold making is more of your thing, for example. And next, for yet another Dragonflight daily gold making tip, and this is especially for those who want to or have alt armies, or what I like to call alt factories, and that is to do your daily profession cooldowns. And there are indeed new ones with Dragonflight from alchemy, tailoring, as well as jewel crafting. Now this is something I intend to set up as well, so stay tuned for that video. And last but certainly not least, for the routines that you do not want to miss, especially for gold making, and that is the monthly Darkmoon Fair profession quest specifically. Now these have received a significant buff in Dragonflight, not only giving you the skill points that they used to, as well as Darkmoon Fair tickets, which you can by the way exchange for things like pets that are also sellable, but now they also give you profession knowledge on top of all that. Plus you can get 1 quest per profession, so this is basically 2 quests per month that allow you to get these additional skill points, which are also valuable in and of themselves, right? Because in Dragonflight, it's really hard to level up your skills past say level 50 or 60 without acquiring rare recipes and or doing crafting orders. So this in and of itself is extremely valuable, on top of the, of course, profession knowledge and also artisan's medal, I didn't mention that earlier, that you can get from these quests. Oh, and actually there are more than 2 profession quests that you can get, because there are also ones for cooking and fishing if those are of any interest to you. I think cooking might be a bit more valuable, because if the recipes are a bit limited and you might need difficult recipes to skill up, that might be a good opportunity to skill up your cooking as well. Although I don't think there's quality involved with cooking, so that might just be not as good as the other profession quests. And that'll be it for today's video. Do let me know if you have anything else to add or if I missed anything. Of course, I realized I didn't mention things like raids and like mythic dungeons or mythic plus, because again, this is more of a gold making guide. But anyhow, thank you so much for watching. Check out my YouTube channel for other videos, as well as my second YouTube channel if you want to learn how to set up your very own video game YouTube channel. And with that, thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video. Peace.